Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is John Katz. I'm with U.S. EPA Region 9, and this is the webinar Big Gulp, Lessons Learned on Providing Pollution Prevention Technical Assistance to Food and Beverage Manufacturers. I want to thank you all for coming. We'll get started in about 1 more minute. We wait for a couple people to come on. Just want to say thanks again for attending, and happy Pollution Prevention Week. This also marks the 30th anniversary of the Pollution Prevention Act, which is the federal act that gave EPA the policy guidance that pollution prevention and source reduction is the choice, the option of choice for reducing pollution at its source prior to treatment or disposal. And that has been what's been guiding this program for the last 30 years. I want to welcome you to this webinar. As you know, this is one of a series of webinars that EPA has been doing on food and beverage manufacturing, which is one of our national emphasis areas for the pollution prevention program nationally, as well as for the grants that we give out under the pollution prevention grant program and the source reduction assistance program. I think we have a great lineup today, and hopefully you'll come away and learn some new tips and some lessons learned from folks who are working on this area in the field. 1 more minute, and just a little bit of webinar housekeeping. If you're having any technical difficulties, you can either go to the GoToWebinar website and click on the FAQs to try to find the answer to your question. You can also, if you can't hear or having other issues, you can put your concern in the chat box in the GoToWebinar control panel that should be up on your screen, and we'll try to assist you there. You can also email Catherine Harrison from ERG, who's providing contract support and technical support for this webinar. Thank you, Catherine, and the ERG team for all of that, and hopefully they can get back to you and help. The slides for today's webinar are in the handouts tab, also in the control panel. And please stay on the line at the end of the webinar for a very short survey, just to get your sense of how well the webinar went. So that will come up as soon as we end the webinar, but we ask you to just take the 2 minutes and fill that out. It's really important for us to know how these webinars are going and how we can improve them in the future. We will have opportunities to have questions. After each of the presenters, we'll take a couple of questions, but we'll then move on to the next presenter just to make sure they all have time, and then we'll have questions for all of them at the end. The preferred way for submitting your questions is to put it in the questions box in the control panel. That's highlighted here on the screen, and we will curate those, and that way we'll be able to combine ones that are similar and hopefully get through as many of those as possible. You can also click the raised hand icon, and we can try to unmute you to ask your question verbally. When we do that, just make sure that that your audio is connected either through the phone or through the computer. And we're trying not to do that because we have a lot of people on the line, and so everybody right now is muted and will be muted throughout the course of the presentation unless we unmute you individually. I did also want to note that this webinar is being recorded, so you all know that, and then we will put the recording as well as a transcript and the webinar slides on EPA's website probably within 4 to 6 weeks. We have to make them 508 compliant and do the transcription and that kind of thing, but it will be available in the future for your use. Before we get started, I just wanted to do a quick poll, ask you 2 quick questions just to get a sense of our audience and what you're working on and where you're and your engagement with the food and beverage industry. So Catherine, if you could launch the first poll.
Sure thing. Thanks, John. So the first question is, what food and beverage businesses sectors are you targeting or working with? And you can click as many as apply. So the options are breweries, distilling, soda manufacturing and bottling, dairies and dairy products, bakeries, meat processing and packaging, or other. And we'll leave this up for another 10 seconds or so, maybe 15. We're getting a lot of responses, so thank you everyone for taking it. All right, thank you everybody. So let's share these results. Looks like we have a majority of 78% that are here from the breweries, distilling, soda manufacturing, bottling. Then there are 38% with dairies and dairy products, 38% with bakeries, 40% with meat processing and packaging, and 38% for other.
Great, that's really helpful. Clearly, breweries, distilling, bottling of other kinds is a big one, and so that's good information for us. And I think our presenters all have a little bit of experience with those sectors, so that'll be great. And it's also really interesting the range and the consistency across all the different sectors. This is a complicated area with lots of different types of facilities, so I think this is a great opportunity to learn from one another. Okay, you want to launch the second one?
All right. Let's see. So we have a second question. What types of assistance do you offer? And pick the ones that apply. So there's on-site or remote technical assistance, technical training or webinars, case studies and written materials, business recognition or awards, or other. I'll leave this up for another 15 seconds or so. Thank you everybody for taking the poll so far.
Okay.
And thank you everybody for checking in with the poll questions. Unfortunately, it does let you select only one. I apologize for that, but if you would follow up after the webinar with more information on what you're looking for, we gladly take that. So thank you everybody for taking the poll. Majority so far on-site and remote technical assistance with 58%, technical training or webinars, there's 15%, case studies and written materials with 11%, business recognition or awards with 9%, or other with 7%.
Yeah, and that was meant to be check all that apply. So I'm sure many of you are doing different things, but it does sound like for the vast majority that they are doing some kind of technical assistance, which again, I think we have the right folks on the panel to talk about their experience going on site and working directly with companies, but also providing recognition and understanding what it is that defines leadership in environmental performance in these industries. So with that, I'd like to introduce our panelists. I'll let them introduce themselves, but first we have Mackenzie Boyer and Rain Richard from Arizona State University School of Sustainability. You guys want to give a brief intro and say hi?
Hi, my name is Mackenzie. I'm a lecturer and assistant research professor in CB, which is the School of Sustainable Engineering in the Built Environment. My background prior coming to ASU was that I worked in consulting doing water and wastewater treatment plant design. And then I got a PhD in agricultural and biological engineering from the University of Florida, focusing on water conservation in the residential irrigation sector. So a lot of my work with irrigation translates into the work that we're doing now, and also my interactions with the EPA or looking at how facilities are designed. I pull from my consulting work in the past.
Great. And Rain?
Hi, my name is Rain Richard. I'm a PhD student at Arizona State. My main research focus is water quality in buildings, and I worked in industry prior to kind of changing my path in life and getting my PhD, so I do have industry experience.
Great. And our second presenter will be Josephine Fleming from the California Green Business Program. Joe, you want to say hi.
Hi, everybody. This is Joe. I'm the Executive Director of the California Green Business Network, and I also run a B Corp consulting firm called Environmental Innovations.
Great, and last but no means least, our third presenter will be Donna Walden from the nonprofit Green Up and working with the Nevada Green Business Program. Donna?
Thanks, John. So I've been doing environmental work since I moved to Nevada in 2008. I was inspired by the work done by environmental organizations and researchers that were working to keep Tahoe blue. I started off working for the Sierra Green Building Association in 2009, and then I went to work, help manage the Region 9 Western Sustainability and Pollution Prevention Network at the University of Nevada, Reno Business Environmental Program. So just recently, my organization Green Up and Western Nevada College received federal funding to launch a green business program in Nevada, and I remain committed to that cause today.
Great. And with that, we'll get started, and I will turn it over to Mackenzie and Rain, who will be our first presenters.
All right, let me just adjust a few things here. Okay, so thank you for the introduction, John. I'm going to be covering a general overview of our P2 project and the drivers behind it, and then I'm going to be handing it over to Rain to discuss what I think are the really unique components of our P2 project that are aimed at addressing water quality issues within the food and beverage industry, which it can impact what kind of on-site treatment they need, which can impact their water conservation or their equipment maintenance and replacement, all of which will therefore impact pollution prevention. So to give some background on how this project came to be, Arizona commissioned a survey of industrial water users in Maricopa County in 2017. Maricopa County is the most populous county in Arizona, and for industrial users, it has a very strategic location because we're along the I-10 corridor for easy access to Southern California. So what we find in the food and beverage industry is that we do have many manufacturers that are providing to the local market, but we also have many large producers that are shipping to the Southern California market. So in our state, we have conservation requirements that apply to industrial users, but not necessarily to the food and beverage industry. So they might be geared towards cattle feedlot or large-scale power plants, even large landscape areas, which a lot of our users do not tend to have. So we really feel like this project it's helping us to assist those users that may not have guidance as to how to conserve their industrial water use. So within our survey that was conducted in 2017, we took all the companies that were within Maricopa County and we whittled it down to 383 were contacted and 104 participated. This here shows some of the key words that were that came in the survey responses. We asked questions such as, how does water impact your business? What change to water supply or discharge would improve your company's bottom line? How is water quality monitored? For many, there was not too much water quality monitoring within their facility. How is water quantity measured? And for many of them, it was just the city meter outside of their facility that they used for quantifying their water use. We asked if there were conservation objectives or goals in place, and somewhat surprisingly, since they were answering a study on water use, they indicated that they thought that water use was important, but most of them either had high-level ideas of what kind of conservation they wanted or nothing quite defined. So we saw this as a good opportunity to help them figure out what would be reasonable targets for them for water conservation. Let's see. And so here we have the 4 groups that we sort of broke the survey response keywords down into: water quality, cooling water, cost reduction, and water quantity. And of course, these are all very interrelated. Water quality in our area, the utilities around here tend to use a blend of groundwater and surface water. That blend can vary throughout the year. That surface water can also vary in quality throughout the year. So many of the facilities will see fluctuations in some of the water quality. Some of them have adapted to this by installing reverse osmosis to be used during part of the year for part of their flows. And some of them have decided that it's just too hard to figure out. They're going to use reverse osmosis on the utility supplied water throughout the duration of the year. Cooling water is a big source of where water is used on a facility, and there's always that balance with cooling water, that enough water is recycled through the cooling towers so that you are achieving energy efficiency or water efficiency, but you also want to make sure that you're not building up any kind of scale within that cooling tower, and then you're going to have more problems with operation, more problems with cleaning. And all of this, the water quality is linked to how much water they're using at their facilities, and that all is linked to cost reduction in their water bills. So this led to our project framework, the results that we got from this industrial water use survey. And our project has two goals. The first one is to provide technical assistance that helps the food and beverage manufacturing facilities in Arizona assess their water and energy use, and deliver practical guidance and implementation strategies to increase water and energy efficiency, thereby contributing to pollution prevention. We also had hoped, and we're still working, we're just approaching it a little bit differently, build in a network of food and beverage manufacturing facility personnel that would be willing and able to share information on their best practices, and to have a group that we could introduce training materials to. And within our project framework, we have 3 tasks. The first one is shown here in yellow, the food and beverage manufacturer discussions. These are our roundtable discussions. 2 in gray was the field data, which was achieved through assessments and the water sensors that Rain will be talking about. And the third task within our project was training modules. So when the industrial water use survey was done, as I said, there was not much, there weren't defined criteria for water conservation for many of the users that were surveyed. However, most of them did recognize that water is a critical component of their business operations, and a very vast majority of these of the survey respondents were interested in starting a water community to learn about best practices, to share information. So with this survey information and some initial discussions with a few local food and beverage manufacturers, we had proposed to do roundtable discussions. So we actually ran into some problems here with just realizing that there was a reluctance of companies to share their data with us, reluctance of companies to just get together, share with their competitors also. And we found that we had included the word EPA with a lot of our marketing, and to us, EPA is coming to help. We're working with the EPA to help you guys provide a free service. And I think some people were a little shy of EPA meant regulatory, what if they find something wrong? So it took a little bit of effort to convince people that we were offering a free service. There wasn't going to be anything we were going to come back and find wrong that we wanted them to pay for, and that the EPA was there to help, not hinder their business practices. So after a couple attempts at these roundtables, we ended up moving on to our step 2, and this will be an area that we'll try to either circle back towards, or that we can reach out to food and beverage manufacturers in a different way. So our second task, our largest task, was the assessments and sensors, and you can see the layout of how we do these assessments. This was a framework that came from the Industrial Assessment Center at ASU, which I'll cover in a few slides. We have an initial client meeting where we discuss what types of issues they might be interested in with water and energy conservation, and we also discuss what types of applications would be good for water quality or quantity sensing opportunities. We collect some water and energy bills, we do some preliminary analyses, and then we go to do a site assessment. Under normal times, these were all done in person, where we would sit down, have a discussion on site with the food and beverage manufacturing personnel. And now during COVID, we've kind of modified that so that we could either do more virtual assessment pieces, or we send in a much smaller team, or we send in 2 groups at different times to limit the number of new people in a facility. We deploy sensors. There's some sensors that the IAC can put on motors to look at motor loads and peak loading, peak energy use in a facility. And Rain's going to talk about some of the sensors that we can use for water quality. After we get all this data, we can prepare an analysis and report to pass off to the manufacturer. So as I said, the Industrial Assessment Center at ASU has provided a framework for our assessments as part of the EPA P2 project, and they're our partner as we work through our project. Their goal is very similar to ours. They're providing no-cost energy assessments to small and medium-sized manufacturers, looking at improvements in energy efficiency, waste reduction. So these are all pollution prevention goals of their project as well. It's been a very successful program, but they've made a lot of recommendations. Some of the basic ones can relate to using LED lights or VFD drives on the larger motors, things like that. And then some of the other recommendations might be more related to what type of rebates are offered by a utility, looking at battery-powered forklifts, things like that. So they've made a lot of good recommendations, but what you can see from this figure is that these are all energy related. And so one of the ways that we can complement the IAC program is by adding in more water quality and quantity recommendations. The IAC is funded by the Department of Energy, and as such, they have some qualifications as to who they can support. So another benefit of us, of our partnership, is that if the IAC has a potential client who maybe is too small or too large to meet their criteria, an assessment can still be done under the EPA P2 project. So with that, I'm going to try to navigate turning this over to Rain. And I lost all my people, of course. So let's see if I can find this. I want to tell you how many times we practiced this.
I can switch it for you.
All right, I'm there.
Okay.
All right, thank you. All right, Rain, take it away.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the sensor kits portion. This is the deployment phase. And I'm going to say up front that we do have an electrical engineer on our team. We definitely needed him. His name is Carlos, and he is amazing. And so this is a Raspberry Pi microcomputer. I wanted everyone to see what it looks like. And this is actually what we used as our computer. So this is coming straight from their website. You can use Arduino as well. We had Raspberry Pi, so that's what we went with. They're basically really small little microcomputers, and they are used for pretty much everything right now. So I love the technology. So this is the basic setup, and I'll show you a real picture in a minute. But what we did was we had a battery pack, and we also had basically the ability to plug the battery pack to allow it to charge, or to be able to plug our sensor kit into the wall if power was available to us. These battery packs run about 8 hours or so, maybe a little bit more, but you can also buy little small solar panels that could provide your battery with power so you could be out there forever if you have an outside location. We had a conductivity sensor because we found that the facilities that were partnering with us were really concerned with their conductivity. And then we have another option, and we could measure pH or temperature. And so you have the flow in and out. And what it looks like in person is basically like this. And we call these sensor kit nodes because we actually had 3 of them. And we had the main one, and then the other 2, if you're connected to Wi-Fi, the other 2 could actually speak to the main one. And the beauty in that is that for the screen that you see on the right-hand side, it would actually show the values for all 3 kits or all 3 nodes. And so on the left, you can see what it looks like inside. This is just a durable, hard shell, like little suitcase type thing that we modified a little bit. You can see the sensors sticking out the side and a little battery pack. And then we have a touch screen so that way we can make adjustments in the field. But we also brought with us a mouse and little wireless keyboard so we could change the type of programming that we needed to. And like I said, if you want to, you can power these with those little foldable solar panels. We haven't yet though. And so, I don't know why this is not, there we go. So this is in action. So we took this to a dairy and their issue was conductivity. And this was off of the RO side of it. And it's kind of small, but on the left of this little suitcase that you see, basically it's a push to connect, and they let us know what type of fitting they had. So we were able to buy the correct fitting type to be able to attach to them. And then we have 1/4-inch tubing going into the sensor kit for measurement. And then we also have a little bit of 1/4-inch tubing coming out for basically just draining the water out so it has somewhere to go. And the question is, what can be monitored in a mobile sensor kit? And so for us, connectivity and pH are very important. And the reason why is because, we have poor water quality with domestic water, the high conductivity phallus equipment. And when you understand your conductivity, you're able to provide better options for determining if you need to blend or if you should just use a completely different water source. pH was important because of the discharge permits. And if it can be powered, I think it should be considered. I think in this case, you can become creative. And all of these are the P2 opportunities that we're providing are basically using technology in a new way to offer real-time monitoring at that moment. You don't need to send anything to a lab, and you also don't necessarily need consulting help. You can just bring this kit onto the site and it'll read for you immediately. So we measured the dairy, and their concern was that they were seeing drastic spikes in conductivity throughout the day and seasonally. And what was the problem with this was that the production line required very low conductivity water. And if it didn't, what would happen was you'd get fouling of their misters. And so it would stop the line. They'd have to change the misters out, and be a cost of materials and whatnot. And so what did they learn? So this is just the raw data that we presented to them. And you can actually see that the connectivity is quite high still. This was too high for their operation. So it did allow them to confirm that, yes, during the summer months, connectivity is too high. City water was probably not an option for them. And they actually were seeing spikes because you could see it would go down, fairly low, which is not low, but about down to 1,000, and then it would come back up. And so they were seeing these spikes. What they learned from this was actually that connectivity probes exist. They didn't realize that it was something that was off the shelf. They thought that they needed to have consultants come out every single time. And they learned that connectivity probes aren't expensive. And once they started to see how we were operating, they realized that they could actually put connectivity probes in several locations to allow them to make better decisions for alternate water source and to help decrease material costs, which was their P2 opportunity in this case. And so our next location was a bakery. And we all learned here that so what can't be monitored as a sensor, but is still important, is copper. So the bakery was having erosion and corrosion issues with their domestic hot water supplying the building. And they had a consultant come out before who had recommended chlorine dioxide as a mitigation effort. And they hadn't sampled their water since this treatment had started. So this was a good opportunity for all of us. Because there's not a sensor that we found that could easily be put into our kits to monitor for copper in real time, we actually took grab samples day of, and we just took it back to the lab and provided their analysis immediately. These are the results, and so we chose some locations based on their recommendations. There's, the first draw is an immediate first draw. As soon as the water turned on, we grabbed the water. A second draw was after a minute or two flush. And we were also able to grab the city water influencer right where at the meter where the city and the building connect. And you can see some quick things was that, the copper is non-existent with the city water, and that the connectivity was a little bit lower with the city as opposed to the building. And so the bakery learned that copper was actually within the EPA limits and that the distribution from the city was not introducing copper. What they found unique, because we also deployed the sensor kit, was that the conductivity inside the facility was higher at the location than within the city. And actually, I'm sorry, we didn't deploy the sensor kit. We did grab samples here. And then what this allowed for is this allows a bakery to determine next steps. So again, this is another P2 opportunity where they can save on material costs because they were having to replace piping often. And once they realize that it's possible to measure your city influent and your building water in real time, this was another opportunity when things change that we can deploy our mobile sensor kits in the future to see if this was just a unique one-time occurrence or if this is happening all the time. And something we have not done but is possible with sensor kits, they have small flow meters. You can purchase these flow meters and install them, and you can actually measure your flow or know your flow pretty much anywhere within your facility. So this is just a basic schematic of all of the places that if you have flow that you can measure to understand what kind of flow you do have. So the benefits of these mobile kits is that you have little microcomputers in the field. It's very quick, real-time monitoring. You can switch out for other sensors. This is non-invasive. You don't have a lot of construction costs. You're just throwing out a sensor kit out there. We created these with communication in mind. So you have, a main computer and then the two nodes. As long as you can connect to Wi-Fi, you have that opportunity. Installation is super quick. Because just like I said, we're just connecting to a valve or some type of port. If a sensor exists, I think that it could go mobile. I just think it takes a little bit of outside the box thinking to get it to work. And you can use these kits standalone or in conjunction with each other. And the other nice thing is that it can weather the elements. So maybe there's a location that maybe it's really wet out there, or it's really hot, or it's just kind of difficult to get to. This is one of those situations where the sensor kit is a good idea to deploy. And so the lessons learned is that we found that similar sectors have very different problems. All facilities are unique for P2 opportunities, and some of them are actually unknown until you start speaking with them, and then they realize some of the opportunities available to them. Because facilities have many competing priorities, they don't have time to do the research or to educate themselves. So this allowed us to provide the education for them, which was a really great partnership. And then knowing that any problems or issues exist up front actually helps with the site visits for deployment of these kits. And then the other thing is that the site visits are actually very critical for sensor install. And one of the main reasons is because if you understand what you're connecting to in advance, you can actually buy the adapter very quickly or find it, so that way you're not fumbling when you get there. And so we have the initial visit to understand the problem, and then the subsequent visits for the install, and then the sharing of the data. So Kizzy, back to you.
All right, so going back to what I said was our task 3, deploying training modules, I want to introduce you to Laurel. Laurel Pasentino was the initial PI in this project, and so this project would not have come to fruition without her. Laurel recently moved on to be an associate research dean at the University of Illinois. So we're going to remember her through our conservation talent scout here. And so one of the main outcomes that the facilities that we've been able to visit and do sensor or water quality testing at, as Rain said, was that the facilities realized that there were opportunities available to them. So we're developing these training modules. Our first one's going to focus on water. Our second one will be on energy. And these training modules will help facilities just know what's out there, know the basics of water quality issues, water quantity issues, and this will hopefully facilitate them working with us in the future on an assessment, or it can just help them to do some learning on their own, see what's available out there so that they could potentially monitor their own conductivity. So we have this going on, and we expect Laurel to be available early next year. And then just our last slide is what we had when we were doing an outreach event. But this has my email address. If anybody has some questions about how we've done the sensor work, you can contact me, and I will most likely pass you on to Rain because she really is the expert in this. And with that, I think that we've concluded our presentation. John, I think you said we could do a few questions now, or would you like to wait until the end?
Yeah, no, let's take it. We still have time. Thank you both, Rain and Mackenzie. And if there are any questions, you can put them in the question box and for these folks, or you can raise your hand if you don't have the question box, and I'll take a look at those. Not seeing any coming in right this moment. Okay. Okay, oh, here, we do have one. What's the approximate cost for the materials for the Raspberry Pi conductivity sensor controller and power supply system?
Okay, so the power supplies were honestly purchased on like an online website, not very expensive. Conductivity sensors, what's nice about those is that they're actually fairly inexpensive. You're looking about maybe $100-something. pH temperature also not super expensive. The Raspberry Pi, I can't remember off the top of my head. Again, not super expensive. So one of our requirements when we built our kit was to realize that money, there's a cost associated with everything. And so we tried to build everything fairly inexpensive. And I think we built our kit for probably less than $500, honestly. Because, even we also got the smallest little, I don't think it was I think it was a Pelican case. I know those can be expensive. There are other ones on the market that aren't as expensive. So again, kept everything under 500. I hope that answered the question.
No, great. Do you guys have any tips on strategies to increase participation in the roundtables? And related to that, do you think it would have helped to not mention EPA at all and just mention ASU? And I won't take it personally.
So one thing that has worked well for us for recruiting people to work with for assessments is to work with the IAC, and they have established relationships with the major power utilities here. So through the case managers of the large industrial users of energy, they've been able to pass off our information. And so now it's the clients have an existing relationship with the utility. So if the utility has already vetted us a little bit, that helps. We are also hoping that the training modules, once we have those, we can release those, and that will be a way for us to show that we have some expertise, that we're legitimate, that we're not looking to make a buck on the side. So I think those are two ways. I think we could be more clear as to, or I don't want to cut out the EPA because it's a great service, and and I want you guys credit for the good work that you're doing. So I think we could stress a little bit more that everything's confidential, whatever, maybe bumped down where we mentioned EPA in our intro paragraph, but I really do think that the work the EPA is doing is valuable and it should get recognition.
And then just last one, and then we'll save, you can put more in at the end. If one of your conclusions was that every company and facility is unique, how does that change the way you're approaching the trainings and the training modules?
So there are some commonalities. Like Rain was saying, the conductivity of the water in this area tends to be very high. So conductivity is one major unifying water quality issue, but it varies with facilities. So like within within a bakery, they're fine with high conductivity water going into their bread or whatever kind of cupcakes they're making, whatever. But the problem with a bakery is when you have some of the processed water going into the little nozzles for their proof boxes, that's when you need to have high quality water. And so that was one application at that facility. There was another one that was that makes ice, and they just decided to treat all their water all the time. So it definitely is it's a balance, a fine line between trying to figure out what's unique about that facility, but also looking at what water quality issues we have as a whole within our area.
Great, thanks. I will just turn it over to Joe to save you the trouble because I have it there in front of me. So next up is Joe Fleming from the California Green Business Program. And thank you again, Rain and Mackenzie. Great.
Okay, hi, thanks, John. Let's see, looks like you guys are seeing my screen here. Mackenzie and Rain, that was really interesting. It seems like we lived parallel lives for a little while. We should have been talking all along. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the California Green Business Network, which kind of can tell you about green business programs throughout the country. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. We provide a technical assistance and easy to use framework for businesses to operate more sustainably. And we do that on-site technical assistance, which these days is mostly virtual. We also promote businesses that make changes that conserve resources and also save them money. And we also provide a green marketplace for consumers to vote with their dollars. So we measure everything we do and we verify everything we do, which kind of differentiates us from other what I'll call greenwashing programs. Part of that is making sure that, you know, it's a common environmental story where one person riding their bike to work or one business swapping out a faucet aerator seems like it doesn't make a big difference at all. But if you measure that over 4,000 businesses, it makes a huge difference. And we're currently serving 30 sectors, and our newest sectors are agriculture, biotech, which is actually larger than just biotech. It's labs, but it was developed for the biotech industry, and food manufacturers. So we are connected nationwide. We're on the leadership team for the Green Business Engagement National Network, as is Donna, who's going to be speaking to you later. A lot of the other green business programs use a joint software, a shared software platform called Green Biz Tracker. So we've got Washington, Illinois, Arizona, Nevada, who am I missing? Colorado are all using Green Biz Tracker, but there's many more states with green business program offerings that are involved in that. And we all get together every couple of years for a conference. I encourage you to check out gben.org to learn about that, and it's great. We all learn a lot from each other. So now I'm going to talk about our specific project that we did with food manufacturers. And this was a joint effort between the California Air Resources Board, U.S.EPA Region 9, and the California Green Business Network, and a bunch of local partners that I'll talk to you about. Our main goals for this were to understand the industry. We didn't pretend that we came into this knowing anything, really. And so we wanted to learn from the industry. We wanted to identify and involve best and most trusted industry resources, glean the most successful BMPs that we could from industry leaders. We originally set out to conduct two workshops, but that became 3. And we wanted to certify 5 food manufacturers, but work closely with at least 10. And the first thing we did was to set up a steering committee. And this steering committee probably met, I don't know, a handful of times. And Judy from the California Air Resources Board found us some great leaders in the food processing industry and food manufacturing. We had utilities, government representatives, educational institutions. They helped us set the agenda for our workshops and the content and the speakers. They helped us set our performance standards for how we were going to certify green businesses. And they also helped spread the word. Our other partners on this were PG&E, as I mentioned, the California Air Resources Board, specifically Judy Naughtley was our star there. And pretty much my partner in crime, along with Pam Evans with the California. She's the chair of our board now. She's retired. And then locally, we had the San Joaquin Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Stockton Chamber of Commerce, and their green business program, and LA San, LA Industry, a great team to work with on their workshop, and also the Fresno Metro Black Chamber of Commerce. So the workshops were great. We had presentations. I think the best thing we did in the workshop was have people from the industry talk about their successes. And these are people that other food manufacturers would look up to and hear their stories. And they do, even though their processes and systems are so unique and diverse, there are commonalities. And I think the approach and the questions asked are things that they can all share with each other. And then we also had some breakout sessions to discuss the big issues that they're having. And these workshops kind of helped us narrow it down to key areas of focus that are common amongst food manufacturers that we can look at. And it helped us come up with our performance standards. We did have live polls that miraculously worked. It was pre-Zoom technology, but they were really good to kind of illuminate real time what people in the room were most worried about. These are some of the inspirational success stories that we used. The Musco Family Olive Company, Morningstar Company, and Premier Mushrooms. They all had great stories to tell. So I think that was really helpful to prop up. They like to hear from folks in their own industry, right? And they know better than we do. So we learned that businesses were and probably still are very occupied with food safety and quality. At the time that we were getting ready, the regulations around food safety and quality were changing significantly, so it was a big deal for them. And they almost, sometimes I felt like they wanted us to focus more on that would be more helpful to them. So we learned that they were very preoccupied with that. There was a large industry association in California that didn't want to play with us. I think because of the regulatory issues, but I can't say for sure. Also a little bit of competition. They felt like they should be doing what we were doing. But several smaller ones did, and the smaller ones were great. They got the word out and were great to work with. Large food manufacturers are a very different beast from the small ones. In the green business realm, we work with a lot of small mom and pop, what we call the SMB sector, small and medium-sized businesses. And the smaller ones are still willing to make meaningful changes, especially where money savings are concerned. The work can be really technically challenging with each business, having unique processes, opportunities, and challenges. There's a lot of variability from one facility to the next, so it's a constant learning process. I know for a fact that when we were training all of our green business program directors on this so that they could work individually with the food manufacturers, there was a lot of insecurity there getting started. So we had to kind of focus on, it's better to know the questions to ask when you're doing the site visit. And you have your performance standards, but some of the global questions, like my personal favorite, because I come from source control and pre-treatment, is where does this drain go? What goes down this drain? What's it for? So knowing those kind of questions to ask are more important. These are our key areas of focus. They mirror pollution prevention in general, and these are what we focus on with the businesses we work with. So I'm going to start with each one of those focus areas. For community, for food manufacturers, these are specific to them. They're performance standards that we added as a result of this work. So locally grown produce from health department approved commercial producers, a written food safety management system, and then looking at their food packaging. And then in the energy realm, here's what we learned from the workshops. We had cold storage, pumps, sanitation, that's a therm savings, right, from heat, compressors, heating and cooling water, and Mackenzie and Rain talked about the chillers and the cooling processes. Oh, by the way, I'm also going to be highlighting all of our certified food manufacturers throughout. So Awesome Organics was one of them. And we were lucky enough to be able to partner with Clear Result. They're a third-party provider from the energy utilities. I think they worked with both Pacific Gas and Electric and Southern California Edison. And so they were able to go out and work with these businesses one-on-one. And the top 5 food processing opportunities they identified were lighting, condensate return, process optimization, VFDs, and waste heat recovery. And so as a result, these are the new measures that we added. Some of these, by the way, are they're required measures. So if you want to get certified, you have to do them. And some of them are elected, meaning there's certain sections of a checklist that are choose 5 of the following 10. And so they don't have to do it per se, but they can choose the ones that make the most sense for their business. And I haven't distinguished that here, but I'm happy to share our checklists with anyone who wants it. So I'm going to run through these because I know we're limited on time, but here's some case studies from Clear Result. VFDs on water pumps. They have great payback, ROI, a payback of less than a year, half a year. Refrigeration controls, again, another not as good of a ROI, 4 years, but still good. We found if we kept it under 5 years, they'd do it. This is heat recovery from the ovens, saving some therms. And then this is similar to what Mackenzie and Rain were talking about, the RO for their boiler blowdown. And that's tricky, right? Because RO also wastewater, so it's kind of, you have to weigh that into the equation. Here's another one from a butter and cheese producer, kind of a preheating system and clean in place to save therms. Okay, so now we're moving on to pollution prevention, and apologies for going fast on this. But the main ones here were IPM for pests and sanitizing, and again, boiler blowdown. It comes up in this area as well. And so we identified some opportunities and obstacles in this area as well. And then these were the new P2 measures that we added to our checklist. So we looked at a lot of the chemicals they used for disinfectants. And again, since they were so heavily focused on food safety, this was a big one for them and how they were sanitizing. We saw a lot of shops that were, still hosing down everything, like spraying everything and hosing it down, not even using like a nozzle on the hose. So there were lots of opportunities, basically for water savings, pollution prevention, and the energy as well on the therms. So but we did have to it was tricky to navigate the food safety requirements in this area. We did look at safer disinfecting and sanitizing methods such as dry heat or steam, dry ice, microwave, ozone, and peroxides in place of the chlorine-based or quaternary compounds. So we did come up with some alternatives there, and that was just kind of barely on the cusp at the time, but I think it's getting more widespread use now. And we also looked at organic ingredients. That's a big deal for us on our restaurant checklist, to offer organic and local options. So we did a little bit of that with the food manufacturers as well. And then the BPA on the inside of the can coatings, this is an elective measure. I think they're still really trying to work on that, but there are alternatives out there. Okay, so now moving on to solid waste. We looked at a lot of food processing byproducts, and wastewater, like the pretreatment can often come up with a sludge, and we tried to come up with some potential savings there. And then here are the top waste issues that we added to our performance standards. Organics is a big one. Look higher on the waste hierarchy, not just waste management. And then also making sure that there was a lot of contamination of waste. So where waste could be reused, it was contaminated. So we kind of looked at that a little bit. Another one was, diverting some of the organics away through donation or animal feed, and trying to make sure that the food manufacturers felt comfortable doing that. Right, we knew this law was coming down to protect people from the Good Samaritan law for donating food for human consumption. We knew it was coming, so that is now a green tip on our checklist, so that everyone knows that they can donate food and not have a liability issue associated with it. And then the transportation options came up for diverting organics. So we looked at that for some businesses as well. And here are some of the new waste measures. Obviously compost, recycle, or repurpose any biosolids. Reusable wrap for pallet shipments instead of plastic wrap. Plastic wrap was big at some of these food manufacturers. Donating food waste. A written policy to reduce damage, contamination, and loss of ingredients. That was a huge one, actually. They were, food manufacturers are really into that. And then also pre-cleaning produce or other material that comes into your facility, because if you pre-clean, you're going to run a cleaner facility and there's going to be less process contamination. That was another one that folks were really interested in and identified as a huge opportunity. All right, now we're switching gears to water. And the energy water nexus comes up here. Boilers, sanitation, cooling towers yet again, and RO, because it can waste water. Float, flume, and soak. This is actually for those of you who don't know, a lot of people will use water to float their product in. Let me see, I think I have a picture on the next slide. Yeah, so here's an example of produce coming in on a wet flume. And I think I actually got this photo from Barf Blog, because a lot of the produce gets bacteria. It introduces bacteria, and so you can get really sick from it. But it protects them as they're coming in because it's a nice soft plan to land, and it's also a water savings technique. So there's other ways you can dry flume. Let's see, going back to that slide to make sure I didn't, evaporation from pond aeration as well was another opportunity. Also cleaning equipment in place instead of disassembling it allowed for water savings. Using low volume, high pressure cleaning methods, spray nozzles, it's so simple, but a lot of them weren't using them. And a process water reclamation system. It's really costly. The POTWs charge a surcharge for high BOD water, And so having a way that they can treat the water and not discharge it to the sewer system, instead reuse it on a neighboring farm, or some businesses chose to grow a beneficial species on land that they happen to have, and watered that with their processed wastewater. So that was a huge cost savings for a lot of the businesses. And then also better pretreatment methods. Sometimes pretreatment methods, they go for the easiest thing that just meets the waste discharge requirements, but it also can create waste. And so here's one of those examples where they were irrigating on site a grass. So I'm trying to see if I can see which business this was specifically in my notes. Yeah, this is a Musco Family Olive Company. They used a nipa grass to treat briny discharge from water in its process. So that's a great example of you know, helping for wastewater issues. So after we spent all this time learning from food manufacturers and seeing where we could maybe help them, we wanted to recognize them. And so we wanted to get 10 businesses into our pilot certification period, and we wanted to certify 5 of them. To date, we have 16 food manufacturers certified, and we have 27 more in process. The first 5 that we worked with as part of this project were Strauss Creamery in Marin, Awesome Organics, Alvarado Street Bakery, Kitchen Town, and Icon Roastery. And so you can see that these were kind of from all over the state. And we have a lot more in Southern California now as well. And ours tended, you know, they were bakeries, bread, coffee roasters, jams, creameries. I know all of you like to work with breweries. It's fun, but we stuck to actually like the food manufacturers and not the beverage manufacturers. But we do have a brewery checklist as well. Happy to share that. And it was a combination of large and small manufacturers, and they were all really fun to tour and learn about. Just a little bit about Kitchen Town in San Mateo, because it was such a good success story. This is kind of like a food manufacturing or food business incubator. They you know, kind of launch new businesses and new industries. They're spearheading the zero food print in San Mateo County. You know, the restaurants that work with them charge a 1% fee for carbon farming, regenerative agriculture to promote that. And then they are going to be participating in a reusable to-go-ware pilot in San Mateo County. And they hosted 2 food waste workshops for manufacturers from the NRDC. So they're kind of leaders, and as they're incubating these businesses, those businesses will go out and share that with others, we hope. So that's a great success story. So I just want to end this now with telling you that, you know, the one thing we can all do right now during Pollution Prevention Week is to vote with our dollars. So I hope all of you will download our Shop Green app. This is a national app. And hopefully you can find green businesses in your area. We could dramatically change the world just by buying with our values. So hopefully you'll be able to find some in your region. So with that, I am going to open it up for questions. And I also just want to thank, and I feel just a moment of vulnerability, I feel a little insecure without Pam and Judy here on this presentation with me, because they were such a key part of this. And I feel like they're more knowledgeable than I am. And but hopefully they were able to tune in today and they're on here. But I'll take your questions and see if I can answer them.
Thanks. That's great. Thanks, Joe. It was perfect. And I'm not seeing, somebody did ask if it would be possible to have the certification requirements in California. I don't know if there's a way that you can share that.
Yeah, we can share that out.
Yeah, and and also for the Green Biz Tracker. So you maybe, if somebody is interested in that, get in contact with Joe. I know you're very engaged in doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Somebody asked, can you share more about the use of compressed air recovery from a high pressure process in another lower pressure process, which was on one of the P2 recommendation lists?
Yeah, let's go back to that slide and see if I have more in the notes for that. So that was on the energy. Where's the, yeah, so so it reduced the work required by the compressor by using floating head pressure controls on the refrigeration system. That's what I have in the notes on that one. And it also produced really delicious cookies. I'm not sure if that helps, but I can put you through to Clear Result to get more details on that one.
Okay. See if there are other questions. What opportunities do you see for food waste to animal feed? What are the barriers to that?
I think there's great opportunities for that, and I think people are taking advantage to it. Transportation was the barrier, and whether they can make it pencil out with the cost to transport that. And I'm not sure whatever came of it. I think a couple of the businesses were considering it, and there are ones that do it right now, that they make it work. If particularly in the Central Valley, they can make it work.
And then the last one is, how do businesses in other parts of the country get certified under the Green Business Network?
Yeah, so I would
shout out to get more programs.
Yeah, exactly. I would contact, the first thing to do would be to go to gbenn.org, gbenn.org, and see if all of the members, if any of the members are a program in your state or area. And if there isn't one there, then reach out to any of us, any of the leadership team on GBEN, and we can see if we can help you get one started in your area.
Great. So I noticed that we have about 20 minutes left. I want to make sure we have time for Donna. So let me turn it over to Donna. Okay. All right, Donna. Thank you, Joe. That was really great. And again, focus on lessons learned, a different approach, but definitely similar messaging about the unique aspects of each business, but also some good, I think, applicable lessons learned. So now I'll turn it over to Donna, who is going to talk about.
Thanks, John.
How she's done.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me today. And I want to thank Joe, Mackenzie, and Rain because I learned so much from you guys just watching your presentations. So Nevada's just getting started with our Green Business Program. And those of us in the P2 business know that it takes years to build programs that yield outcomes. So what we're doing is we're leveraging the statewide Green Business Program to help build a long-term P2 function. So Nevada, like other states and P2 programs, have limited resources. So we're leveraging the work of other states to build our technical assistance capabilities. COVID has slowed our access to businesses, but we've made progress on researching the food and beverage industry, and we're ready for a program rollout. And like businesses, we've had to pivot our approach. So we found that many P2 technical assistance activities can be done virtually. I'm going to give a little bit of background on the Nevada Green Business Program. Here we go. Green Up and Western Nevada College were funded by EPA to launch a certified green business program in Nevada and to collect environmental outcome measures. So very similar to the program that Joe described, we're using Green Biz Tracker in Nevada. So last spring, we expanded the network to include 6 additional program partners: Nevada Division of Environmental Protection, Green Act, Keep Truckee Meadows Beautiful, Green Vision, Incline Village General Improvement District, and Envirolution. Together as a network, we're able to help small and medium businesses green their operations, save money on utility costs, and receive recognition for their sustainability efforts. And we're doing this all for free. We're using the web-based software called Green Biz Tracker, which helps us easily collect metrics, such as the greenhouse gas emissions reduced, amount of energy and water saved, and tons of waste diverted. So everything that Josephine talked about, we have access to those capabilities through Green Biz Tracker. We're interested in aggregating the data across the state to see how Nevada is performing environmentally. And this will help us, we believe, build our green business program, possibly get green legislation and funding. We're just getting started, and we absolutely do leverage the work being done in California and other states to accelerate our program. And this is possible because of our affiliation with the EP2 program, P2 program network, which I'm going to be talking about, the Green Business Engagement National Network, which Josephine talked about. That's a nationwide consortium of green business programs, and licensing of Green Biz Tracker, and all the support we get from California. So without this help, building a green business network for Nevada would have been formidable. And I think it would likely have taken us 20 years and an army of professionals to accomplish. So I'm very grateful. In terms of the food and beverage work that we're doing, anytime you decide to launch a program, you have to do research on your industry and similar markets. So GreenUp engaged a student researcher from the University of Nevada, Reno, community-based research program to help identify P2 challenges and solutions in the food and beverage industry. We also did a lot of our own research on breweries. So on the map, you'll see that we've identified 98 food and beverage manufacturers. The largest concentration, no surprise for anyone who does business in Nevada, is in Clark and Washoe County. So that is Reno, Sparks, Carson City metropolitan area, and then the Las Vegas metropolitan area in the south. Together, the counties account for 87.4% of the total population, and they're the main markets for the food and beverage products. So you can see the sectors that we did research. We identified P2 challenges and solutions for each of these industries. And we also, like I said, GreenUp also researched the brewery sector. So there are about 30 different types of food and beverage industries, and they contribute about 10% of the total manufacturing output in Nevada. We have about 280 private food manufacturing companies in Nevada, and they provide employment for over 9,000 people. Because Nevada is just getting started and we have limited resources, I asked the research student to do a relationship network to find the most common environmental challenges to the food and beverage industry. So on the right, that complicated chart merely just shows all the industries that I talked about and their common P2 challenges. And if you look on the left, the top P2 challenges are similar probably for all industries: water pollution, solid waste pollution, air pollution, high energy consumption, and high water consumption. And all of these concerns are addressed in the checklist in Green Biz Tracker. And I do want to acknowledge that Joe has indicated recently that you can't use one approach for all food and beverage sectors, and I acknowledge that advice to be true. However, since we don't have the bandwidth to go sector by sector, we will initially go against the advice and do a one-size-fits-all approach. And then over time, we'll get deeper and deeper into the individual challenges of the sectors. And again, we've identified 10 sectors where we've done a lot of research on. So the general food and beverage concerns, some solutions, safer and more effective wastewater treatment. Josephine talked about that. Educating industries on the possibility of a commercial sale of the recycled byproducts. Transitioning machine operations to renewable energy. Optimizing batch sizes to reduce the amount of water used in some processes. These are common solutions. And when you do a relationship network, you not only do commonalities, but you have to look at level of impact. Here in Nevada, we have a lot of farming and ranching, and so some big impacts we have to look at is habitat destruction, soil erosion, nitrous oxide emissions, and of course, across all industries, packaging waste and transportation impacts. And I have some solutions on the right. So we did decide to go specific to breweries. And the reason we did it is not just because I like beer, that is true, I love beer, but because the breweries are so easy to identify and there's a large number of them here in Nevada. They also have an impact on our economy. So according to KTMB Channel 13 Las Vegas, the Nevada economy received a $434 million boost from the craft beer industry in 2018. And so that's pretty significant. Now, due to COVID, things are changing somewhat, but prior to COVID, there were 58 Nevada brewers listed under the National Brewers Association register. And when I checked last, there were 55. I know that at least 2 brewers have tanked in Northern Nevada. But still, we know where they're at. Half of them are in Northern Nevada, half are in Southern Nevada. And Reno Sparks has a high concentration of craft brewers. So you can quite literally just walk in the door of the brewers. They're really easy to access. There are common challenges facing breweries, P2 challenges. And of course, the production of beer involves the blending of malt, hops, and sugar with water, followed by fermentation with yeast. During the process, there's a large quantities of water that's used both for the production of beer as well for washing, cleaning, and sterilizing after each batch is completed. The incoming water to a brewery can range from 4 to 16 barrels of water per barrel of beer, so a huge amount of water. Wastewater is very significant waste product of the brewery operations, and it's estimated that approximately 3 to 10 liters of waste effluent is generated per liter of beer produced. And of course, we know that wastewater from breweries has a high organic matter content, which is damaging to local wateries if it were to get into it. Also, the brewing process is very energy intensive, and there's a lot of solid waste, such as spent grain, spent yeast, and there's a sludge called Kieselguhr that is considered hazardous waste before and after filtration. So the good news is that there are a lot of viable solutions for breweries, and later I'm going to give you a success story for a local Nevada brewer. Spent grains and yeast both have commercial value in feeding animals in the feed industry. Also, the impact of packaging materials can be addressed through lighter glass bottles, lighter plastic bottles, and aluminum cans, and that improves transportation efficiency. Managing fossil fuel and the greenhouse gas emissions they produce is always a top priority. And we could reduce fossil fuel usage by renewable alternatives. And because there's a large variation in energy use between the brewers, we know that there are good opportunities for energy efficiency across the industry. So those are some things. And then also, there's a variety of ways that you can recycle waste, including using spent grains for baked goods, using a microbial fuel cell that can generate energy as it treats wastewater, and then, of course, turning waste into compost. So those are some solutions. Now I'm going to talk about a very specific experience I had working with breweries here in Nevada. One of the very, very fortunate things is during the P2 meeting in Denver last year, we discovered that there's several other states that have successful P2 programs with breweries. And I was looking for a half-day training model at the time because my experience with Nevada businesses tells me that they're not going to spend more than a half day away from their operation. So I wanted a half-day model. I received advice on breweries from a lot of people in the P2 network, and I'm going to call out a few people that were particularly helpful. Cecilia Reichel from Vermont, Ben Jarvis from Idaho, John Steyer from the Brewers Association, were all very helpful to me. And then I watched a series of talks hosted by Joy Onash on the food and beverage industry. And I watched a lot of informational webinars from P2 providers across the USA. So the P2 network was a very valuable resource for me. I'm going to give a special shout out to Derek Bohr from the Colorado Department of Public Health and the Environment in Denver. He had not only helped me with an outline for my half-day workshop, he gave me a flyer and gave me permission to copy it, which was just amazing. The flyer on the right, I pretty much modeled that for a workshop that I was going to do here in Nevada. And I talked to the Nevada Craft Brewers Association. We were talking about combining a half-day sustainability training with their annual meeting. That would have been very amazing because reaching out to brewery one at a time is very time consuming. And to just include the training along with their annual meeting, I would have had access to about 50 brewers all at once. So we were in discussions about having this meeting last fall, and then for some reason it got pushed out to spring, and then COVID happened. So we all know how COVID affected a lot of things. So we're going to have to move the training to a virtual model. So of course we will do that. We'll have a virtual training. We'll do a virtual brewery tour. I'm talking with Great Basin Brewery about doing some sort of virtual tour. We're talking about a workshop in winter 2021, probably February, in Great Basin, who I'm going to talk a lot about in a minute, we're going to partner with them on it. We're going to follow up our brewery training with stakeholder meetings, and they'll have to be virtual. And the technical assistance will be held virtually. And thankfully, California developed a very good virtual on-site model, which of course we're going to model entirely. So one of the things that is going to be very difficult to do during these COVID times is benchmarking, because breweries are operating, many of them are operating at less than optimal capacity. And so it's very difficult to get a baseline. To measure behavior change, we have to get an accurate baseline, and we're not able to do that during this time. So now I'm very delighted to give you a success story about Great Basin Brewery, one of our prominent breweries here in Nevada. And I wish I could say that their success was directly related to the technical assistance that Green Up and the Nevada Green Business Network gave them, but that's not true. They've been operating in the state since around 1993, and they've had sustainability measures in place for a long time, but I'm going to share their P2 values with you nonetheless. So the largest byproduct of the brewing process is the spent grain, and Great Basin brews over 2.5 million pints in a year. And when you do that, you create a lot of grain. And I asked them just how much grain they were diverting, and that's 353.7 tons of grain annually. That's an awful lot of grain. So what do you do with the spent grain? Well, Great Basin blends the grain with local honey and a few other things to create artisan breads and pizzas, which they serve in their restaurant. And they feed cows. They feed a lot of cows. They have a relationship with 2 local farmers, and that enables them to avoid putting any spent grain in the landfills. It saves them the cost of disposal, and it saves the farmers the cost of feed. And it creates a product that is unmatched for its quality. I love the cow pictures. And not only do they feed cows, they purchase some of those cows back, and they serve 50-50 burgers and lasagna in their restaurants. So Great Basin was a farm-to-table restaurant long before it was a trend. So the story doesn't end there with a few sustainability things that they're doing. They're a good example of a circular economy, and I'm going to add to the story. Nevada would like to have a circular economy, and there are good examples across the nation of good circular economy stories, but we're not that far along in realizing a circular economy. But we're working on it. We have some really good examples of businesses moving towards zero waste. We are so proud of our Tesla Gigafactory in Sparks that is getting its suppliers to co-locate on their campus, and that reduces transportation costs and it improves business efficiency. But it's not a circular economy story in the true sense. So the story I'm telling right now is a good start, and it's the best we have here in Northern Nevada. In early 2020, Conscious Container, they're an organization that's just over the border in Truckee, California, was selected to join the Anheuser-Busch 100 Plus Sustainability Accelerator Program to conduct a refillable glass bottle pilot in Northern California and to collect and preserve bottles for washing and refilling. So currently in the US, the bottles are collected and crushed for cullet. So it's either sold to glass manufacturers or dumped into the landfills. Here in Nevada, the glass is crushed and used as filling in the landfill. They're not collected. Conscious Container conducted 3 pilots over 3 years. And as part of the pilot, they set up 9 drop-off locations around Lake Tahoe and Truckee, where they collect and store bottles for washing and refilling. They partnered with the Truckee Tahoe Sierra Disposal to separate out specific craft beer bottles at the recycling center, which Conscious Container picked up and then stored at Great Basin Brewery in Nevada, and then shipped it off for washing and refilling. They also worked with wine bottle operations, but that's a different story for another time. But the important thing is they worked with Great Basin Brewery in Northern Nevada, and they set up incentive-based bottle drop-off at 2 of the brew pubs. So the consumers got credit for each case. They got a coupon for each case of bottles, 12-ounce craft brewing bottles, towards a meal at the brew pub. And bottles were stored at Great Basin's breweries, a production facility, and then shipped for washing and refilling. So there were several beer for bottle events, and it's where you bring in a case of empties and you get a free pint. During the 6-month time frame of the pilot, Great Basin recycled 55,000 glass bottles that otherwise would have been crushed up and ended up in the Nevada landfill. So I'm going to give them a little plug because they're such good stewards. They have a new label, Leave No Trace, and it's something that drives their decision-making process from the top down. The Great Basin Brewery is proud of their place in the circular economy, and they'll continue to support new initiatives and programs. And in the words of their brewmaster, Tom Young, they want to help make this world a better place, 1 pint at a time. Isn't that a good story? Now, in order to complete our circular economy story, I have to mention one other organization, Full Circle Compost, here in Northern Nevada. Great Basin sends their spent grain to farmers, but Full Circle will also take it, and they do compost tons of stuff, green waste, food waste, biomass, and turn it into soils and compost and mulch. And the little graphic on the left says that they have composted 113 cubic yards. And if you wonder how much that is, it's as much as a football field full of 28-foot high, 7-layer bean depth. I got that from Cody Witt. Cody definitely has wit. And just as significant is based on EPA's WARM model. That's the equivalent of taking 33,000 cars worth of CO2 emissions off the road. So to summarize this presentation, wanted to say that the foundational work, we're just getting started, but we've completed the foundational work on food and beverage manufacturers. We've researched industry sectors and identified manufacturers, so we know what the top sectors are in Nevada. We know where they're at. We can find them. We have their addresses. We're launching technical assistance in 2020 to 2022. We're going to focus on breweries as one of our sectors, and initially we're going to do all food and beverage sectors as a target, and we'll do virtual trainings. And then we're going to track all the environmental outcomes on GreenBiz Tracker and the P2 facility, grant business facility level reporting template. So if I have a tip for anyone getting started, well, first of all, if you can, license GreenBiz Tracker. But second of all, we have an excellent P2 network, and we leveraged experts from other states, and I encourage you to leverage experts from across the nation. They have a lot of resources and can help you build and accelerate your programs. So I want to thank you today for listening, and anyone who wants to connect with me can do so at info@greenupnow.biz. So I'm going to give the control back to you, John, and you can take it away.
Thanks, Donna. I realize we're about a couple minutes over, but did want to ask folks to, if you can stay online for just a couple questions, and also you will get the evaluation questions survey just as soon as the webinar ends. And if you are still on the line, I just ask you to leave, even if you have to go to something else, leave your go to webinar open a little bit and answer those when you get a chance, because we really do need those evaluation questions to help us improve any future webinars. We do have a couple quick questions for Donna. I appreciate everybody willing to stay a couple minutes over. The first was, what methods did you use to identify the food and beverage manufacturers? What databases did you go to? Where did you get that information?
Oh my goodness. We identified them through the student researcher, and there were probably 20 different databases and resources. It was very, very intensive. I do have a report. If someone is interested in the report and the sources, I'm happy to share.
Great. And then the second question along the lines of sharing, and really at your last point about leveraging what other people have done. And I think that's really a great tip. Obviously, there's a lot. I guess there's no need to do another brewery checklist. There are probably 40 of them out there if you're getting started with breweries. But are you, and I would extend this to any of the other panelists, have checklists that you'd be willing to share for breweries and wineries?
Well, I think that's a good question for Josephine.
Yeah, I was going to kick that over to Joe as well.
Yeah, we're happy to share any of our checklists. We can either, share them. We have a mythical town called Middle Earth in GreenBiz Tracker, where I think you can see all of our checklists there, but we can also PDF them and send them that way. So the best way is for people to reach out to me, shoot me an email, and I can make sure you get what you need.
Great. And then there was a question about how to get access to GreenBiz Tracker. And I think I'll just answer that quickly, is to get in touch with Joe or go to the greenbiztracker.org website, and then you can contact one of the friendly customer service representatives.
Yeah, and if there's enough interest, we can do a demo day or something where we get all any interested people together, and we can give a little demo of GreenBiz Tracker and how it's used.
Yeah, that would be great, especially around the breweries, wineries, and any of the other food manufacturing checklists. I think that would be interesting.
Yeah.
I do note that we're 6 minutes over, so I want to respect everybody's time. Thank you again to all four of our panelists, Mackenzie and Rain from ASU, Joe from California Green Business Network, and Donna Walden from Green Up. Really great information, and I look forward to all of you continuing to do this great work. If you have any questions, additional questions, you can reach out to me at katz.john@epa.gov. And if you just want to know how to get a hold of any of the presenters, you can reach out to me and I will make sure that I connect you. So with that, I want to end the webinar and thank you again, and also thank our technical team at ERG, Catherine Harrison and her colleagues, for making this run so smoothly. So thanks everybody. Happy Pollution Prevention Week, and look forward to speaking with you soon. And once again, please answer the evaluation questions when you get them.
Thanks so much, John. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.